Just because we haven't done it before doesn't mean you can't. Innovation, energy to put into new projects, it's going to get rewarded. And I think right now the focus is, rightfully so, it's been long in coming, is in the maritime. And island nations, island communities require shipping. I mean, there's only so much you can bring in on aircraft. So it just is a natural fit. It's a part of the culture, part of the island way of life. Um, this can be a huge boon for Guam, but the window of time to act is very small. And if there's not enough momentum, if there aren't enough people raising their hand with an idea in the very near future, this thing could dry up and the opportunity could pass before we even have a chance to start moving. So we got to get the ball moving. And that's my urgency when I was earlier talking about get your ideas in a package, get the governor on side and say Apra Harbor or maybe just the airport. You just have something. Say, we want to be considered a maritime prosperity zone, self-nominate, get that letter into the Secretary of Commerce and go.
Day, it's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson, and welcome to another edition of the Innovate Guam Podcast where we explore all things innovation, technology, and improvement related to the island of Guam. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Substack. My podcasts drop at the beginning of each week. Also, don't forget to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of the month. All right, today is a little different. Today's guest is a returning guest to the Innovate Guam podcast. When we bring somebody back, it's because conversation wasn't finished, or maybe the stakes were a little bit higher, or the policy environment has shifted and the implications for Guam are quite real. Brent Sadler returns at a critical moment because the recent release of the Maritime Action Plan signals a generational shift in how America thinks about shipbuilding, maritime workforce, industrial resilience, and national security. And if you've been following this podcast or reading my columns, you know already Guam sits at the intersection of all of that. Our guest today is Brent D. Sadler, Captain, United States Navy, retired. Brent currently is a senior research fellow for naval warfare and advanced technology at the Heritage Foundation, where he focuses on maritime security, naval modernization, and the technologies shaping the future of sea power. Before entering the policy arena, Brent completed a distinguished 26-year career in the United States Navy. He began as a nuclear-trained submarine officer and later served as a foreign affairs officer and military diplomat in Asia, with assignments supporting senior leaders at the Department of Defense level. He is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, earning a degree in systems engineering with a focus on robotics and a minor in Japanese. As an Olmsted Scholar in Tokyo, he studied at Keio University, Jochi University, and the United Nations University. He later earned advanced degrees from Jochi University and the National War College, graduating with distinction. Brent is also the author of influential books examining maritime competition and America's naval posture in an era defined by China's rise, work that connects strategy to industrial capacity and shipbuilding reality. Brent, welcome back to the Innovate Guam podcast. All right, Brent, let's go ahead and start simple here. What is the Maritime Action Plan and how is it related to the previous executive orders and what is it really trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so thanks. Great question. I've been getting a lot of that since this came out on Friday the 13th, and not the best day to unleash a big policy document, but it's been something that a lot of folks in industry, A lot of states, I think even some of the territories were eagerly waiting to see this and had high expectations. It, in my estimation, it didn't meet the expectations, but it is moving the ball forward. So it's important to kind of put the map, the Maritime Action Plan, kind of in context. The first thing that was the genesis, even before the executive order, is the Ships for America Act. So that predates by about a year, and that's a bipartisan bill and legislation that then you see the executive order that President Trump signed out in April last year, and you notice the commonality. Things are the same, and that's not organic. That's because a lot of work by a lot of folks have been done to kind of get there. And then you see the Maritime Action Plan, which was directed in the executive order. Now it's a little late, should have come out in
Yeah.
November. But, if you want it bad, you get it bad. So it was good that it cooked a little longer. But you got this Maritime Action Plan. So there aren't a lot of surprises. I do have at least two concerns that I think are potentially failure kind of concerns with this. But by and large, it's what I was expecting. The maritime prosperity zones is a key element. The focus in on innovation to compete in the global marketplace, not just for shipbuilding, but for shipping. And there's also, as expected, a real healthy dose of focusing in on the merchant mariner and the folks in the shipyards, both but the folks that are actually like longshoremen, but as well as the folks working in the shipyards and moving things around. So, and I can talk more about my concerns, but by and large, it's not a surprise. It needed to be stronger, I thought, and more directive than it was. And that's a complaint, a criticism that I think is you're starting to hear more and more about as others are starting to look at it. But that definitely got my attention.
Okay. Well, thanks. I appreciate you giving a good overall there. And I
Yeah,
do want to get into your concerns. And then after that, I want you to kind of do a deep dive on the
yeah,
zones that you were talking about. So why
yeah.
don't you go ahead and tee up some of your concerns that you see there with the plan?
Yes. So, I mean, this is supposed to be a directive. It's supposed to direct agencies to do certain things and also to prioritize their budgets. Now, there's a light touch on the budgets. It's not zero, but it's not strong enough. Having worked the interagency during if you remember during President Obama's time, there was this rebalance to Asia Pacific. So I'm very
Right.
familiar with the interagency bloodbaths over money. This document's not
Yes.
strong enough to on its own, but that's where you need strong leadership. Which my number one concern is this is comprehensive. This is a national effort. It's going to have to run for a long time, more than just the current administration. But you need to have a chief executive agent, someone that can go walk into the president's chief of staff, Susie Wiles' office, and say, "Hey, I got an issue. I need to have a deputies with the undersecretaries, or I need to have the president in a meeting because he needs to hear something, and then he needs to make an action decision uh, around the table." That's what's needed, because if you don't have that, you're gonna have commerce kind of going off like a cat in one direction, Department of Transportation, Maritime Administration going in another direction, and even a different speed. And Coast Guard, everyone's going to be like cats, all running in different directions. And so you need to have someone that can pull them all together. Most importantly, make sure that they are getting actions done. And if one says, "Hey, I don't have the budgets or the authorities," then the chief executive for this in the White House goes to the president and says, "Hey, I need to go walk over to Congress to get this." Or, "Mr. President, can you do another executive order? Give the authorities to this secretary or this director or this admiral to go do what's needed to be done to get results." So that's one big concern. The second
Okay.
one has to do with China, though. But yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to ask you about that and led into a question about
Yeah,
it seemed like the way it was presented in the map, they were presenting more of an incremental
yeah,
reform rather than a complete transformational industrial reset, if you will.
yeah,
So I think you really talked to that it's kind of the way that it's presented. It's not strong enough to
yeah,
drive the kind of change and pace of change and urgency of change that's really needed. But go ahead to your
yeah,
second concern about China.
yeah. Well, the China one kind of touches in, and I'll come back to that. There are, not everyone in the United States. There's a lot of special interests, not geographic, but inside the maritime industrial sector, shipping, shipbuilding, and ports, and even like the trades companies, the ones that are like importing like textiles. But I'll come back to that, the China connection. So in the document, there's a part in there that talk in pillar 3, I believe it is, to the tail end, they talk about holding China accountable. But then when you read that part, it's not really clear that we're holding China accountable there. In one of the last sentences in that section, it talks about that the administration will consult with China on shipbuilding capacity issues. That's highly problematic because the Chinese are the adversary in a new Cold War. They have no desire to see us bring back to health our maritime industrial base. That they don't want that. In fact, they worked to ensure that we would not be able to do that because they know it means we can't build the Navy that we need and sustain it. So that really jumped out at me. There was another place where rather than twilighting the suspension on fees on China-built ships, they generalized it. They said we're going to have fees on non-American built ships, but then it's less clear, the real focus was China. How do we actually try to encourage our allies too? So I'm not sure it's setting up for us to have allies to gravitate towards this effort. Sets it up to be more adversarial with our friends, like the Japanese, the South Koreans,
Yes.
in this part, as well as the Greeks and the Danes who have big shipping companies.
So
And then yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you think that that was intentional, that this was a way to kind of placate and tone down the tension with China for some reason?
Um, I do think it was a little bit of that because you have the President's Summit with Xi Jinping in April, if it happens. There's a lot of things the Chinese have to deliver on their word, which I'm skeptical, but that summit's coming, maybe. But this language, it's more problematic and more deeper soaked in than trying to allay concerns in Beijing that we're going after them. I mean, this is business after all. That's is how they understand targeting them as a competitor in the business world. So it really doesn't make any sense. It's not like we're talking about going after them with bombers or building a military strike capability to go into Beijing. This is building up a capacity at home to handle our shipping and building ships. So it would be misguided if that was the case in the White House or this administration. But I do think that there is a lot of money and there's a lot of special interest that do rely on access to the China market, access to cheap Chinese shipping, and also access to Chinese shipyards to do
Mm,
maintenance and even make orders of ships. And so they would rather not see that very lucrative business put at risk. So, and
mm.
I probably have to validate that a little bit, that it's just, I'm not just saying it out of thin air. I think it was back in December, late December, and there's more, but this is at least something that's published that your listeners can go to, that talked about several $1 million being pumped into lobby groups to work against the Ships for America Act because they did not like the fees on Chinese shipping. American textile companies, in particular, several other import companies, but also the groups that are representing shippers in the United States were also, because they want to send their ships to China to get maintenance done for cheap. And so they tried to kill it. And I think it's in The Economist or Forbes in late December. If you go to my social media and you can find it there as well. I might repost it after this, so it's up in front. But
Okay.
yeah, they got called out, and it's not little money. It was millions of dollars they pumped in to kill the Ships for America Act. So there's some
But that's
sectors
the
here that
whole
aren't.
point.
Yeah, what's
That's
that?
the whole point.
Yeah,
To do a forcing function, to channel that back to America, so that
yes,
Americans are using American infrastructure and resources to do
yeah,
that. So that it's a known kind of thing. And yes,
yeah,
there's going to be increased costs in the transition, but
yeah.
overall, it's something that's good for America.
Yeah, and I mean, we spent a lot of time. I mean, there was a team. This goes back to late 2023, and it really takes off in January, February of 2024, where you had a bipartisan team in Congress. One of those rare moments where you got Republicans coming together deeply to work on a national issue, the Ships for America Act. So there was a lot of research, a lot of work done. One, to make sure that it worked to that purpose, to rebuild the American maritime industrial base. But two, that it didn't kill off any American like shipping company or shipbuilder or disenfranchise the longshoremen. Made sure that none of that happened, that no one got pushed down or lost in it. What happened is we tried to structure it, and I think very effectively, such that when it was executed, those that excel or that are target would actually get incentives and would rise up. No one was going to get pushed down. And the fees on the
Interesting.
Chinese ships were part of funneling money into a trust account that then could be used to put the money back into the sector. But anyway, yeah,
That's interesting that that was that level of proactive thought into it,
yeah,
and it was put out that way so that if you kind of lean forward and you innovated, if you will, again,
yeah.
podcast theme,
Oh yeah,
uh, then you were going to rise. But if you kind of stayed the same or whatever, then you
mhm,
might find yourself falling behind. But like you
yeah,
said, it was intentionally done so that nobody got hurt
yes,
or pushed down in the
yep.
in the effort.
That's right. I mean, we know there's a very long history of Jones Act shipping, so there was no need. It wasn't necessary. It wasn't necessary to even touch the Jones Act, and it was a very conscious effort to focus in on the overseas marketplace. That's what we're going to focus in on, and the innovation. I think we've talked before about this. You have to have a positive vision that you're going to build to, and that your investments and your capital one is, building modern shipping ports, building modern shipbuilding shipyards, trying to find new ways of logistics. Nuclear power on commercial ships is still very much a thing. In fact, I was just with the Secretary of Energy and also the Undersecretary for Procurement and Acquisition for the Pentagon, Department of War. And I flew out from California with a micro reactor, like right in front of me on a C-17, from there to Utah, where they were going to go install this and put the fuel in it. And I'm looking at it, we're making progress on really changing and putting nuclear power back into a commercial use case. That's the kind of innovation that'll get us ahead of the Chinese, because no one else is going to trust a Chinese nuclear reactor pulling into their port. An American one,
Right.
that's a lot higher trust there.
Yeah, and I think they had a team of those guys with the portable nuclear reactor come out to Guam about 2 or 3 years ago
Oh yeah,
to give it. Obviously, there's a lot of concern and stuff like that. People think that that's going to make Guam there's a segment of people who think that's
yeah,
going to make Guam more of a target or whatever. But I think that we need real energy solutions, and there's not going to be
mhm,
like one silver bullet.
yes,
And nuclear certainly can be part of the portfolio to help places like Guam rise, because we're out here in the middle of nowhere. We've got to
mhm,
have some kind of other energy solutions as we move
yeah,
forward. So really
yeah,
great. All right.
absolutely.
So any other concerns you saw in the map?
Those are my two really. Those two concerns are like critical, like what we like staff officer and the Pentagon would say that's a critical comment. This is like a make or break comments. Those two that I made. Too weak on China. No twilighting of this pause on fees on Chinese shipping, and two, no senior executive for the whole effort. So those are that the nothing really jumped out as a surprise, like I wasn't expecting. There is and I would say I do need to say there is a good discussion about innovation in there, so that was good to see. And maritime prosperity zones. I guess maybe one thing I was pleasantly surprised. I'm going to be curious if they're actually going to get this many, but the authority inside the Maritime Action Plan is for upwards of 100 maritime prosperity zones. I was thinking like maybe 20, but 100. I'm sure there'll be a lot of places that want to take advantage of that, uh, like Guam and many others. So
Can you talk about that? Let's
yeah,
do a deep dive on the maritime prosperity zones.
yeah. So, as written right now, and the other thing in the Maritime Action Plan is conversations I've been pushing for. It's nice to see that included is there needs to be a review of regulatory relief. So, inside the Maritime Prosperity Zone, there needs to be smart, do no harm kind of environmental, ecological kind of regulations. So, when a state or a municipality or a waterfront community says we want to be one, then they come in with these are the exceptions to regulations that we'd like to see. So it's a negotiation, a deal between both. You'll get these benefits. You tell us what regulations. The federal government then says, okay, inside this bubble, we will relent on the following things, and we request the state through the governor's office relent on the following, but geographically constrained. Do no harm is the standard to the environment and to the communities. So an important thing, but that's in there. You establish it. It works from the community, and the governor's office would petition to the Secretary of Commerce. So they actually put in the process. I was telling them what the process was. It's nice to see it in black and white. And so the governors go to the Chamber of Commerce, or I'm sorry, the Secretary of Commerce, and they make an assessment, and then they start the process of approval for a maritime prosperity zone, and you get tax incentives and several other things.
So, if you were advising Guam's Leon Guerrero
Oh yeah,
administration on going out forward and basically putting in a package to be a maritime prosperity zone, what would you advise? What kind of things would Guam want to put in that package in
yeah,
order to sell itself and be successful in that effort to get max
yeah.
benefit for Guam?
Yeah, so I mean, when I lived in Guam as a middle school, high school student, I mean, I remember a lot of car carrying ships used to pass through, and it used to be kind of a transshipping area. I think it still is to an extent. So, Apra Harbor is the obvious place. It's a deep water port. It's got a lot of potential. It's necessary for military too, but it's also a great transshipment hub to the other islands in the Northern Marianas, but also into the Federated States of Micronesia as well. So it actually can become a transshipment hub, much like what American Samoa is aspiring to do right now in Panopano. So what I would advise the governor is, one, nominate yourself like today. Like, as soon as my meeting's done with the governor, I'd say you should social media put a press release out and say, hey, Mr. President, please consider us as a candidate for maritime prosperity zones. Send a letter to the Secretary of Commerce, because now it's in the Maritime Action Plan, who you need to write to, and do that immediately. Then start working the details. I think Apra Harbor, if you just focus on that, I mean, definitely want to make sure that the communities around, like PD and other, that they are all on board. You want the
Yes.
people, so you definitely want to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to ask for. This is how it's going to benefit us. And then the governor, is the one that makes the decision to go forward and decides with the federal government how they're going to actually execute this. What I look at it like, and the other thing is you got to put together a package. And this is the other thing the governor's office would do is say, look, at Apra Harbor, the Navy needs to have deeper dredged areas. They need more ship repair capacity. We would
Right.
like to have more energy resiliency and develop out the power station there, and maybe fueling, maybe transition to LNG or even nuclear. We're talking about that. And so inside this bubble, you say, look, in the maritime waterfront, we need a reliable energy source for the island, but also for the harbor operations, which, oh, by the way, build and help the Navy. Two, we like
Yes.
to dredge it. We like to get deep, we like to improve the pier connections, shore power. The other thing is, I grew up there too when a couple of big typhoons blew through. Having the ability to bring in there's people designing nuclear powered barges. So if Guam gets hit really bad by a typhoon, you can bring in one of these barges that can then connect into the power grid. So modernizing the power plant so that you could connect in and supply power from a ship or a barge into the power grid in Guam. What you have normally for ships is not going to cut it. Being a nuke submariner for 26 years, I mean, there's only so much you can reverse into the power before you blow up circuit breakers. So that, and I mean, the building out the pier structure, the cargo handling as well, so that you can get more transshipment activity in Guam, I think is a good one. Make the business case. Say, we're going to have this. We're going to deliver supplies to Rota. We'll move cargo to Saipan, Garapan. We'll also branch out and supply, the Chuk Lagoon and other places, and start building out Guam as that shipping hub.
Innovation leaders, it's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson here. Are you ready to elevate your vehicle fleet operations? Fleet Solutions is an AI-enabled fleet management system. Fleet Solutions provides real-time video, smart analytics, and total efficiency. Keep your people safe and keep your business moving forward faster than ever before. Fleet Solutions, arriving tomorrow, today. Visit thefleetsolutions.net or call 671-988-9748 to schedule your personalized demo and revolutionize your fleet operations today. Yeah, so last time you were on, we talked a little bit about the Guam Transshipment Task Force
Yes.
and the elements of that. Obviously, that was hot and heavy during COVID time. The governor's administration was looking seriously about how we needed to diversify the economy. And actually, I'm going to take a sideway thing here. I'm actually teaching a course at UOG this
Oh,
semester,
yeah.
specifically around the Guam Transshipment Task Force. So the students are learning all about that. But I
Oh, that's awesome.
digress.
Yeah, yeah,
I come back to this. This would fit perfectly in it. You
yeah.
could take a lot of the legwork that's already been done with the Guam Transshipment Task Force and then just amplify that and use that
Yeah.
as your submission to
Yeah.
be a maritime prosperity zone.
I mean, use that course you're teaching at UOG to build out the plan. So the governor in American Samoa has a similar type of developmental plan for Panapano to develop it out as a transshipment hub. So go to the governor's office there in Agana and say, here's what a strategic plan would be for the development of Guam as a transshipment hub and what's required to do it. Here's like the first year, the fifth year, the 10th year, and the cost. And there you go, Maritime Prosperity Zone. The other thing, real quickly, I'm glad you mentioned UOG. The need to train workforce is also covered inside Maritime Prosperity Zone. So if you want to train up people to do maintenance and repair on ships, Navy ships, obviously, but also to do repair and maintenance on commercial ships or fishing boats that come into to Apra Harbor, that should qualify. Again, how you set the Maritime Prosperity Zone, maybe you need to have a satellite campus down there in the waterfront, but maybe not. You could just have a corridor because there's no rule that says it has to be a certain shape. It doesn't have to be like circular. But again, the focus is mostly on industrial activity. But if you don't have workers, if you're workforce limited, it doesn't matter. So do include thinking about how you'd grow out, the workforce training. Folks actually doing the welding, doing the pipe fitting, doing the painting, to the folks that might even be doing naval architects. That might be a bridge too far, but building out
But at
this
least
labor
a
force is
vision.
important. Yeah, yeah, it's a vision.
Yeah, a vision to kind of move us in that direction. And uh, are you familiar with the Western Pacific Maritime Academy?
Yes, I've heard of it. Yes, I've never been to it though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, I'm going to be um, basically moderating a panel discussion tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
for the Guam Association of Career and Technical Education. The founder, retired Navy captain, he's going to be one of the panelists. But he's been doing a lot of work with Guam Community College to
Yeah.
build that kind of ecosystem, if you will, and now I think that with the map coming out, that's going to provide a lot of um, legitimacy and framework
Yep.
for him to continue to build out that program and these connections with GCC and
Yep.
UOG and others under the workforce development piece of this.
So I know the Navy and the Department of War is very keen on growing the workforce in Guam, and to have the the shipyard labor force growing and
Yeah.
higher technical competencies trained there on the island. And oh, by the way, you can go to the
Yes.
other islands too. You come there to train certified, work a little while, and then go to wherever the home is, the other islands, to include even construction, like the infrastructure for ports and power plants. I come back to time is of the essence. If the governor can self-nominate, that starts the ball rolling. The president's going to be going and doing a State of the Union speech on Tuesday next week, the 24th. I'm hopeful that there's some announcements in there of these type of issues, maritime initiative things. I'd be surprised if there's zero, because how much he spent on his first speech in the joint session back in March of last year after he was elected and inaugurated. So This is the moment to get on the radar. And, I can't agitate enough. And you've got all the pieces there, the workforce development, the educational piece for the higher, for like the higher, like management level, as well as the design piece, which you're going to need naval architects even doing repairs. It's not just building ships. And then
Yes.
the business case, supporting Navy, but also transshipment throughout the Northern Marianas and the Central Pacific, and also the ability to build out a more resilient energy base, which also serves business, tourism, but also the Department of War presence that's on Guam. So I'd say go forth very rapidly.
Yes, yes, I appreciate that. Now, so I'm going to go back to an article I wrote a couple weeks ago in the Pacific Daily News. It highlighted my observation that Guam tries to do a lot of these kind of big idea, big movement kind of projects simply through federal appropriations
Yeah.
and grants. And that the kind of industrial scale that you're trying to do, these kind of projects, you really need private sector
Yep.
capital. And obviously, the map talked about public
Yep.
private partnership models to unlock capital for maritime infrastructure. So, what kind of mindset shift do you think is needed in Guam to attract that private capital into a maritime industrial project like what
Yeah.
we're talking about? And how could Guam best um, position itself and advertise itself, market itself to private capital to come in here and invest in these kind of things?
Yeah, definitely need to do a business development plan. Start with like, who's going to be your initial customers? And if your only customer you're thinking about is the federal government, that's a flawed plan. But again, the customer is a necessary one. So embrace it, but then say, okay, our first customer is going to be. So if let's first start with the Maritime Prosperity Zone, and the first phase is going to be developing out resilient energy. So you're going to
Mm,
update the power plant, and I've lost track. I don't know when the last time, but I know it's been a recurring issue is to try to ensure that the power generation on the island is resilient and is actually you have a buffer. Surge demand's not
yeah,
going to.
the new Okadu power plant went online September of last year.
Okay.
It's had a couple of fits and starts, but overall it's been positive. In fact, it came online earlier than the September timeframe, but like I said, there was kind of some um,
Yeah.
uh, fits and starts there. But with the new power plant online and that becoming a reliable source of power generation, it should be able to be the foundation to bring Guam to the next level.
Okay. So then move to the next part, training out the workforce to support shipyard, maintenance on Navy vessels and any other commercial vessels. So looking at historically how many fishing, deep open ocean fishing vessels that come to Guam, how many commercial vessels come, cargo ships, and try to figure out, okay, I'm most of the workforce, it's a captive market, the federal contracts. What is the military need from Guam for maintenance? And you say, okay, well, how can we? Where is there a gap and how filling that? But then also look to it's like, look, we'd like to be able to do maintenance on some of these fishing vessels that are in the area, and maybe some of the ferries that move in between the islands. Let's start doing the maintenance here. Bring that one from Palau or Ulithi, and let's bring it back here to Guam, and let's do some maintenance here and try to actively go out to grab that market space. So, I mean, I mentioned Ulithi because there's this really ancient Chinese gifted vessel that's used to move people out from Yap to Ulithi. And so trying to get in, looking at that to say if we can just get one of those, contract of one of those small stuff to start with, and then we can start to pick up bigger and bigger contracts for the Navy. That's the first step. So skip the power generation one, unless there's something there on like maybe they want a more distributed grid, and then focus in on the maintenance. But then you have to connect it to then what's next. It's like, all right, well, we're dealing with the Navy, we're building out the competencies. Now we want to attract, maybe some of the larger container ships that are maybe going down and doing working for Paja or Matson, and we say we'd like them to start sending there's ships that are doing the Pacific routes, say like in South Pacific to American Samoa. I mean, I've seen some of these container ships, send them to Guam, become a center of excellence for ship repair and maintenance, and try to start bringing some of those vessels too. And again, if it's the Maritime Action Plan, there's going to be benefits by doing this inside U.S. territory.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's how you leverage
And
that too. It makes it incentivized.
so, what would you say to one model that's been thrown around for Guam? And that model is, what if associated with the port, Apra Harbor area, um, that the government of Guam uh, went out and maybe did a bond initiative to get capital from the private markets and invested in a large, state-of-the-art industrial facility for ship repair. Um, State-of-the-art industrial area where they can then charge different primes and their subsidiaries to come in and do work on various Navy contracts. So, like under this one huge industrial facility, there might be multiple different contractors doing multiple different maintenance tasks for multiple different contracts, all of them um, basically under the umbrella of this government of Guam facility and
Hmm.
pipeline of workforce that's being delivered into that through
Yeah.
uh, work with GCC, UOG, et cetera, so that the primes and their subsidiaries are hiring a lot of those people to come in
Yeah.
and work at this kind of facility.
Yeah, if you start with that kind of the government's, like even local government kind of control and a key element, it's going to be hard to like transition it away to a business that's self-sustaining and the business model that makes money, that generates the
Yeah,
capital. And I know
yeah,
the economies of scale in the islands kind of hold back. There's only so many people, there's only so much business that you can go after. So there is an appetite issue that you have to constrain, hungry industries, there's only so much you're going to get because of the market size. So my suggestion is the maritime prosperity zones is that kind of bubble. You create a regulatory relief, you create tax incentives inside this prosperity zone. So no capital gains tax, 100% expensing, perhaps even distributed profit tax, which I think I talked before. The idea is if you're a small company, small medium company in Guam, and by the way, this worked like hugely successful in Estonia where they did this. And so you take your profits, and if you put your profits back into your workforce, higher wages for your lit, or you want to hire more people, or you want to build a new workshop, or you want to buy some more like metalworking equipment, lathes and things like that. Well, you get to write that off in your
mm,
corporate profit. You don't pay any tax on that, and no capital gains tax because you're inside the maritime prosperity zone. So you really get incentivized. So the money you make is the money you keep if you're investing in to grow your industry, your maritime industry. So
yes, yes,
so there's probably going to have to be a hand of the government in some respect, but it has to be very, very, I would suggest to keep it very, very light. For example, in the education, it might be worthwhile to be more directive and also to go out and recruit maybe professors if you're going to grow out a naval architecture kind of thing. So maybe having that government kind of go out across the region or in the United States and say, hey, we'd like to bring someone out to be a professor to teach naval architecture or to bring someone from one of the naval shipyards and you say, hey, let's go recruit a couple of old timers that know how to do nuclear welding. And you bring those
mm,
folks out there to teach and train an apprenticeship program. I think the submarine squadron there in Guam would be really happy about that. So there's
I'm
there's a
sure
relationship there for sure.
CSSC would be. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So I was talking with Josh Wanera, who's a consultant in New Zealand. He was talking about some of the models that they're using in um, New Zealand, Australia, and Tasmania to kind of build out uh, these defense generated economic development zones, if you will.
Yeah.
And one of the models that he was talking about was kind of creating an entity above an individual business. So all the businesses kind of come together in that area to create an entity, if you will. You know, they
Yeah.
pool their money, their resources, and now that entity goes out and competes
Yep.
for business on behalf of um, in this case the maritime um, uh, zone, and
Yep.
then as they win work, then it's distributed out
Yep.
amongst the individual companies and stuff, and you kind of grow that way.
Yep. So consortium, legal, have a contracted agreement between, say, 3 or 4 different enterprises, and you form a consortium. And where I think this has the most promise is in construction, civil engineering and construction. So going and doing pier upgrades, building roads to connect the port to the airfield, doing even airfield updates. I mean, so infrastructure intensive type of civil engineering construction. This has been an issue where frequently, you know, construction firms that are hired by islands or by the federal government, they bring in laborers from outside the region, like outside the Pacific, like from South Asia, or they bring them in from the Philippines. What would be better is if you had a consortium of, say civil engineering or construction firms spread across the Marianas and also down perhaps in the Federated States of Micronesia. And you all say, hey, the folks that we have, the enterprise that we have just in Guam is not going to be big enough to do the job that you're asking. But I got a consortium where I could pull in the people from Saipan, I could pull in people from Palau, I could pull in people. And the idea I'm kind of mentioning are all inside that compact or territories of the United States. So you don't have to worry about visas as much or at all. And you basically say this consortium then already has a structure about how they're going to share in the profits and how they're going to share in the labor and the training and also the standards of how they build. So say, for example, the governor of Palau says, hey, I got this massive project. I want to expand my piers and build out, cranes so I can do more cargo handling and bring in bigger cruise ships. Well, there's no one there that's going to meet that. So you say, well, we got this consortium, construction consortium. We can start work in 6 months. We already have the standards. We know the cultures. We know the businesses in the area. We know where we can go get housing. We know everything. We know the environment, and we can pull our construction workers over there and start work on it. So construction like that, I think, is a great case. And oh, by the way, when you do the training and you're doing that, you could actually establish one of those inside a maritime prosperity zone. You get the benefits again. So, for example,
Yes.
establishing a consortium headquarters in Apra Harbor that's focused in on building out and modernizing the waterfront there. But if you're part of a consortium in Garapan, maybe down in Koror, maybe over in Chuk Lagoon, and you could actually start to then share the workload amongst the other places in a consortium and just have a contractual structure that you build around it.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds exciting and promising. Last time that you were on, we talked about the governor's initiative called GAMMA, the Guam Additive Materials and
Oh
Manufacturing
yeah.
Accelerator. The partnership between Governor of Guam, the United States Navy, and Astro America to bring 3D printing capability to Guam, such that the U.S. Navy could start benefiting from 3D printed parts for their subs and their ships and stuff. How could you bring Gamma into kind of the
Yep.
mix of these maritime prosperity zones?
Um, well, your customer there with Navy is an obvious one. The problem with the Department of War is they've got a lot of very sensitive parts still they haven't certified for additive manufacturing. So if you go down that route, make sure you've invested with a strategic idea that eventually you're going to be doing some very large, what normally is forged pieces that are pretty big. So don't constrain yourself to like what you can do today. Have in mind, like buy a large warehouse. It's like 1,000 times bigger than what you need for the jobs you would expect now, so that you can grow it with the feedstock, conditioning, holding various varieties of and quality control of the feedstock to do these very large parts for the Navy. But I'd also say don't limit yourself to the U.S. Navy. Also look to the commercial airlines and say, hey, but
Yes.
you have your warehouse and your facilities are down in Apra Harbor. inside the Maritime Prosperity Zone. And you say, well, we're going to also do parts and contract out to the airport. And so, like an aircraft comes in, a Korean airline, they have, oh man, we got a maintenance problem. We're going to have to wait for another part. We're going to be grounded here. Well, it'd be better if they could just print out the part in 6 hours and they could have that airplane back into the circuit. I mean, I don't know how often it is, but I do know, I've suffered with this in my lifetime. So I'm sure it's still a
Yes.
thing. So it'd be better just to have that responsiveness. And so your capital costs for your warehouse, your labor, and a lot of the material, it's all covered. And how you would actually deal with the profit you make on dealing with like the airport that's maybe perhaps outside the Maritime Prosperity Zone, that's something that gets sorted out in the contract with the federal government and the establishment. And so maybe you just say, hey, the Maritime Prosperity Zone includes a bigger area. It says the airport to the port.
Yeah, yeah, that's great ones. I tell you, Brent, you don't ever disappoint. I knew this was going to be a great conversation. For a final question,
Yeah.
when listeners walk away from this conversation that we had today, what's the one thing you want them to understand about America's Maritime Action Plan and Guam's opportunity within it? What would be kind of your summary of that?
Be bold and think creatively. Just because we haven't done it before doesn't mean you can't. Innovation, energy to put into new projects, it's going to get rewarded. And I think right now the focus is rightfully so. It's been long in coming, is in the maritime. And island nations, island communities require shipping. I mean, there's only so much you can bring in on aircraft. So it just is a natural fit. It's a part of the culture, part of the island way of life. Um, this can be a huge boon for Guam, but the window of time to act is very small. And if there's not enough momentum, if there aren't enough people raising their hand with an idea in the very near future, this thing could dry up and the opportunity could pass before we even have a chance to start moving. So we got to get the ball moving. And that's my urgency when I was earlier talking about get your ideas in a package, get the governor on side and say Apra Harbor or maybe just the airport. You just have something. Say, we want to be considered a maritime prosperity zone, self-nominate, get that letter into the Secretary of Commerce and go.
Awesome, awesome. So, Brent, before we go ahead and wrap things up for this episode, um, do you have any new projects that you
Yeah.
want the listeners to know that you're working on right now? And if people want to just kind of reach out to you or see what kind of things you're working on,
Yeah.
where can they go? Where can they contact you?
Well, yeah, the easiest thing is just to find me on LinkedIn because I mean, you connect there, and I'm on X, but the place where the real writing and and I do respond as much as I can to serious questions and even constructive criticisms. If I mean, it's been too long. I mean, I got family on in Guam, but I haven't been back in too long, so I got to get back. So I might have something wrong, a gross conceptual error, as they say in the submarine force. Please give me the feedback. So that, and then of course at heritage.org you go to the Heritage website, you can find me in their list of experts, and all of my writing for Heritage is there. A lot of it that's not Heritage, but we can actually get onto the website. You can find there. I'll give you a little sneak peek about what's coming. There's a big paper coming out on commercial shipbuilding that was intended
Oh,
to
wow.
be so that was it should be out tomorrow at the latest. Literally, I'm getting text while we're here from the editors to try to get out because I want it out before the State of the Union next week on Tuesday. The other one, which is a real, I think, and this is one where I'd really look for feedback from folks on the islands, certainly on Guam, where there's a Pacific Charter. So there's a lot of things going on in the Pacific, but there's not really, a lot of times people do things to the region. We need something like a positive vision that's really speaks to and is really from the needs and the heart and mind of the Pacific Islanders. And I'm not just saying, ethnic. I'm talking if you live on the Pacific, like you live in Guam, there's certain realities of distance, tyranny, of the cost. Certain things are just not available as easily as
Yes.
so there's realities. This Pacific Charter needs to embrace all of that and give like a unifying positive vision to kind of suppress some of the worst things that are out there that are trying to pull apart the islands and quite frankly could lead us into a conflict again in Asia, and that will include Guam and all the other Pacific Islands, based on where we are with China today. So yeah, look for that
Yeah.
Pacific Charter coming soon.
Wow, Brent, thank you for your incredible insights. That was a powerful and timely discussion and a reminder that innovation and the national level only matters if communities like Guam understand it, align to it, and execute against it. Thank you for being a returning guest on the Innovate Guam podcast and helping us connect the Maritime Action Plan to real world development, workforce opportunity, and strategic positioning for Guam. To my audience, I hope you were inspired and learned something new today. I certainly did. Remember to follow me on all social media platforms, including Substack. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes. And don't forget to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of the month. See you next time, and remember, whether you're at work, at home, or at play, always innovate. Thank you.